What's up? Welcome back. I'm John Stark from ActionMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're gonna bring them down to somewhere. But in order to do that, I need you to click like and subscribe so that we can talk about this film. This film does have audio description. It's distributed by Mubi, so you're gonna want to make sure that you find it on like video on demand. I rented it through the Apple Store where it had audio description. So that's how I got it. I would definitely recommend the audio description because they do speak in Irish for part of the film, so you need somebody to translate that if you can't read the subtitles. And that's your little public service announcement to start off, to kick off the video. We've got Christopher Abbott, Barry Keoghan, and Colm Meaney are sort of the most recognizable stars to an American audience in this cast. It's a feature directorial debut. This debuted at Toronto International Film Festival in 2024 and was picked up for distribution. It was released in 2025 by Mubi. And it feels like the kind of film that the Coen brothers would have loved to make. It's got a little bit of that revenge thriller thing in it. It's going to leave you unsatisfied because it just kind of doesn't want to tell you everything. It's a film that sort of relishes in the unsaid, in the things left unsaid, in the things unanswered, which is kind of like the opposite of giving you tons of exposition. It's just like if something isn't brought up casually in conversation, then they're not going to explain it to you, which is kind of weird because like halfway through the film, they give you like sort of like a second, we open on a flashback, and then halfway through you get sort of like another perspective on that flashback, which is weird because it kind of conflicts with the style of the way the story is being told. But at the beginning of the film, Christopher Abbott is he plays a young man named Michael who is in love with this girl Christine. Everything takes place in Ireland, and they're farmers and sort of like living on next door to each other, but there ends up being this obvious rivalry between the two of them throughout the film. Anyway, and there's this car accident that happens, and we flash forward, without giving you too many spoilers, we flash forward 20 years later. Michael's returned home. Everything is different because he didn't leave with Christine, because this car accident that ended up killing his mother changed his life, and now he's back. And his dad, played by Colm Meaney, is in a state, I guess you could say. And Abbott clearly has like rage issues anyway. I mean, he's constantly on edge. It's amazing that any woman could find him like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, seems like a solid choice. So 20 years have passed, and she's living next door. She's got this guy Gary, and a son played by Barry Keoghan, who honestly feels way too old to be in a film where Christopher Abbott is supposed to be like considerably older than Barry Keoghan. I know like there's an age thing, but I don't know, it's just the way that Barry's been cast recently. It's an odd choice to have these two sort of in opposite roles. So the movie centers around sheep. So basically, these two families, that their properties are up against each other. There's like this hill that's in between them, which is where the sheep that Colm Meaney, his sheep sort of exist up on this hill. And one day, two of the rams are missing, and Christopher Abbott goes looking for it. And the neighbors are like, yeah, sorry about that. They wandered into our property and we found them dead. I don't know what happened, but we burned them, and that's what we do with dead animals. Sorry. And at first he kind of accepts it at face value, but then later on finds out that that was bullshit, which starts like this whole thing, this whole revenge plot. His dad's like, bring me their heads. and it becomes a thing. So uh, it becomes a violent, bloody tale of unnecessary revenge. And if you like animals, you will, and you go to Does the Dog Die, which is a website. You can go. I can go ahead and save you the time. Yeah, animals. This is not a film for people who can't stand to see any harm come to animals. Uh, just not. Even in audio description form, it's described. So I know people who can like anything can happen to humans, but they're like, no, if one animal is, if anything happens, they can watch like the substance levels of violence, but my God, if an animal dies, they're out. So you would be out of this film pretty quickly. Um, so, yeah, sheep do not have a positive outlook in this movie. So I don't want to spoil anything from that point. It just becomes sort of like a revenge plot with Christopher Abbott being sort of like a rage machine, and also trying to deal with the fact that I think he has these unresolved feelings from having just left Christine all those years ago, and what's up with that. And there's just some unanswered stuff about Barry Keoghan's Jack and things. And for a feature directorial debut, I thought it was solid because it showed a lot of promise. But it's also the kind of feature directorial debut where you're gonna see if that director goes on to have a substantial career in Hollywood. It's the kind of thing where people just won't talk about it that much. Like deep fans will, but people really won't talk about it nearly as much. Like there are some early Coen Brothers movies that aren't talked about nearly as much as the later Coen Brothers movies. It's almost like you would think their career started at Fargo, but it really didn't. But the way these people talk about the Coen Brothers, it's like, oh yeah, Fargo was great. Yeah, they made like 8 movies before that. But I know people really love Raising Arizona, so it's a little bit of a joke. But seriously, like people talk about Fargo as being like the Kickstarter for their career, as if Blood Simple wasn't a great movie. So I think the same thing could kind of happen here, where I think probably the better comparison is maybe like Christopher Nolan with Following. I think Christopher Nolan has outdirected himself ever since that movie. Basically, every time out of the gate, except for maybe like one movie, I would say. Uh, this could be that for this director. I think he makes a concerted effort to not tell you things, but then in the end, you're just going to feel like it's unresolved. And the movie just kind of ends and doesn't really have the kind of resolution or ending that's going to make you go, well, I feel like I'm full, you know? Uh, this is the amuse-bouche of movies. This is, well, that's it. That's all I get. Yeah, it's a tasting plate. What did you expect? He relishes in the banality of this existence of being farmers and being sheep herders and the being out in the countryside and this sort of life, and how something as small as losing 2 rams could dramatically change and affect the world in which we live. So it wasn't my favorite movie, but yeah, it kind of feels like a lot of times earlier in the year, it becomes a little bit of a dumping ground for films that could have had Oscar campaigns, but then somebody realized probably not going to happen for this film. So we get a lot of like the early year indies of films that are filling up that slate, so that later in the year, these same studios can market the films later on. Unfortunately, every once in a while, I do actually fall in love with something that happened in the beginning of the year. Sometimes they're films that have absolutely zero shot of Oscar nominations, like Snack Shack. But every once in a while, there's a film that ends up, and then everybody just kind of forgets about it. I don't think Bring Them Down, if Bring Them Down had had a different release date, would have benefited from anything. I just don't think it's that strong of a movie. And I do love sort of the hilarity that this followed, that this is like Chris Rabbit had two movies this year where there's this sort of like sins of the father thing that are being passed down to him, and he has to deal with it in ways that he ends up playing a character full of rage. And I mean, there's so many like correlations between this and Wolfman. It's just very odd. It's very odd. They're released like a couple weeks apart, and yeah. So, but he's, they're fine actors. Everybody in here did a nice job. Colm Meaney's been around forever. Colm Meaney's the kind of actor where it's like, if I ever saw him like floating in Oscar conversations for supporting actor, if he ever had, like, if this film had done something for him, I'd be like, please, can we talk about this more? Because he's been a character actor. Dude's been around forever. I love actors when they finally get their due. And it feels like they've been around forever. Like, I was really excited to see Brendan Gleeson finally get nominated for Banshees of Inisherin. Like, it's nice when character actors get their due, especially considering the supporting actor category. It doesn't necessarily need A-listers in the supporting actor category. Like, oh, good, Tom Hanks is in the supporting role. Great. He'll be fine, But we have so many times where we could elevate character actors who never really get the chance to anchor films, and they stand out, but we take them for granted for standing out. And that's kind of this too. I think Chris Rabbit's going to run that risk of becoming a character actor who just gets taken for granted. Obviously, Barron already has Banshees of Inisherin behind him, so he got lucky really early. So he can continue to build his career based off of that. I don't know, Bring Them Down is fine. I didn't like the audio description track. I don't like audio description tracks that read like you're reading me the script. Like Michael, and then you speak Michael's line. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like that. And I know that it's as a result of underfunding the audio description and having one guy doing all the voices. But I've seen other description tracks where it does become a little just absurd when you have like a male narrator doing female voices or a female narrator doing male voices, and you can't get, I get that. I get when it's like all one voice doing one thing, and you're like, how do we break this up? But like Shogun was one voice doing everything that was not in English. And I didn't love that either, but there's something that breaks it up when when you can't find a way to change the inflection in your voice. And that comes down to hiring the narrator. Because a lot of times I've seen projects like this where some cheap ass company has paid for one narrator to do everything instead of multiple voices. And at least you can get a vocal talent that can change the inflection in their voice. Max had a really good audio description track using one narrator, where the narrator did change the inflection in his voice between characters. So he spoke lighter or softer. Like, he added colors to his voice based on who he was dubbing. So there are ways to do it that are better than this. And this is my least favorite way of doing it. There are like 3 different ways to do this translation thing that I've seen. 4. One is the best way, which is pay for people to come in and do different, like, who are completely different vocal talent to do the voices. That's the best way. That's like 5 stars, 2 thumbs up, way up. Second best way is, okay, and this is on the company, because this is where we get, movie companies do not give a shit who you hire. So this becomes on the audio description company. Hire a narrator who is capable of putting color and tone in their voice. So that way you don't have to do what this track does. Because even below that, I would prefer what Shogun had, which was, I know I'm using really specific examples, but these are the tracks I remember. This is what memorable is. Sometimes projects are so unmemorable that at the end of the day, I walk away from them and I'm like, I don't like that. I literally stopped watching Day of the Jackal because I couldn't take the audio description track anymore. Not really, the film, the TV series didn't really interest me that much, but also I hated the audio description track for that. So it does matter. And luckily, this was just a movie that I had to get through, and not a limited series. But it just annoys me when there's some like when it feels like we're like novelizing it, or you're script reading and you're bouncing around from character to character, and you're like, Michael, we have to go down to the shore. Tom, why do we have to go down to the shore? Michael, to see the sheep. Tom, why are the sheep down there? You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like, why is that in the narration? You know, like, um, I don't need a script reading. So that's what this is. It's my least favorite version of doing this type of audio description. Although I would say Day of the Jackal went a little step further, and not only did it do that, but it also summarized. So instead of giving you verbatim what somebody was saying, it gave you the gist of what they were saying, which was obnoxious, which is why I stopped watching. It's fucking obnoxious. So, bring them down. Yeah, it's okay. It's fine. I don't know that I'm gonna remember this movie too much at the end of the year as being anything exceptional. It's dark. It's depressing. It's not a happy movie. Uh, the only reason I'm at all impressed is for a feature directorial debut. I thought it was pretty strong, and they got some great performances out of the actors. So that's sort of the saving grace of the film, of me recommending it. Plus, it's not long. It feels sort of long considering what you're doing is not necessarily expansive in terms of plot. It's a very simple plot. But at the same time, it's also just, it's not a really long runtime either. So, I mean, like, there are things that work in its favor. I would have loved a great score behind this. I think it's got kind of a pretty average dark score that didn't really, it was fine for the movie, but it didn't really stand out. It's not something I'm going to remember. So, I'm going to go Bring Them Down. I'd lean positive on this, but I'm going to give it like a C plus. At the end of the day, I'm not excited about it. Like, I don't hate it. I'm not mad at it, but it didn't really excite me at the end of the day. And a lot of the things, I wish it hadn't gone back in the middle and given us perspective, because one of the things I respect about the film is it doesn't want to tell you, it doesn't want to leave you answers. Like, there are questions I want to ask, and fine, if you're going to leave me like that, if you're going to leave me with this sort of like, well, in the real world, you wouldn't have all these answers, you wouldn't have all these questions, we wouldn't necessarily tie up everything in perfect, little bows. Great. Then don't do the flashback in the middle. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't give me perspective halfway through the film to clarify something. Just present the film as is. You can give me the catalyst event and then go from there. And I would have respected choices that he made for the rest of the film had he not had the idea to do that in the middle of the film. I think it kind of ruins the gag, so to speak. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.